Bum 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 bum
Bum bum bum bum bum bum bum bum bum.
bum bum
One of the most discussed global issues today is global warming. What is it? How is it caused? How do we stop it? One thing is for sure, it is bad. To limit climate change and global warming, experts say that we need to reach carbon neutrality ASAP, which means to achieve a zero carbon footprint. But what is our carbon footprint? Well, our carbon footprint basically means the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases we emit into the atmosphere. This is bad because today we burn a lot of fossil fuels such as natural gas or coal, producing a lot of greenhouse gases. These greenhouse gases can deplete the ozone layer as well as hold heat in the atmosphere, warming up the Earth, which causes a lot of ecosystems in the Arctic to melt, which is detrimental to the species that live there. This is called global warming. The problem is that we are so dependent on fossil fuels, which is what is causing all these emissions, so we need to look for another energy source. The question is, which energy source will take its place? The answer might not be what you think. Algae. Researchers from Concordia University in Montreal have invented a power cell that harnesses electrical energy from the photosynthesis and cellular respiration of blue-green algae. But how? Before we look at how they do that, we should probably look at what blue-green algae are and what goes on in photosynthesis and cellular respiration. What are blue-green algae? Blue-green algae, also known as cyanobacteria, are unicellular aquatic and photosynthetic bacteria, which typically grow in colonies that we can see with the naked eye, which is why they look like algae. They're one of the oldest known fossils, as they have been around for 3.5 billion years. The important thing you should know is that they are oxygenic phototrophs, which means that they are able to generate and release oxygen as well as use light photons for nourishment. That whole process is known as photosynthesis. But what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the process by which plants and other photosynthetic organisms, which contain the pigment chlorophyll, trap the sun's energy and transform it into energy-rich chemical compounds. Sunlight energy is basically food for these organisms. The net chemical equation for photosynthesis is 6CO2 gas plus 6H2O liquid plus light energy produces C6H12O6 solid plus 6O2 gas. This can be considered as a reduction-oxidation reaction due to the electron transfer occurring, as carbon dioxide is being reduced, meaning that it is gaining electrons, in this case 4 per carbon. As well, water is being oxidized because it is losing electrons, in this case 2 per oxygen. As well, since the energy is on the side of the reactants, it is an endothermic reaction, meaning the reaction absorbs and uses the energy. Photosynthesis consists of two separate chemical reactions, the light-dependent reaction as well as the light-independent reaction. In the light-dependent reaction, light energy is trapped to make ATP. At the same time, photolysis occurs, meaning that water is split into oxygen and hydrogen ions. As well, it releases electrons. The chemical formula for this is 2H2O produces 4H plus aqueous plus O2 gas plus 4 electrons. As you can see, this is an oxidation reaction, with H2O losing electrons, in this case, 2 per oxygen. The important thing to remember is that these electrons are transferred via an electron transport system/chain. The electrons then react with NADP, which reduces it to NADPH, meaning that it gains electrons. The chemical formula for this is NADP plus 2 electrons plus 2H plus produces NADPH plus H plus. In this reaction, ATP and NADPH are produced, which are later used in the light-independent reaction, as well oxygen is produced as a byproduct. The next reaction, the light-independent reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle, isn't as important for this process, but I'll explain it anyways. In this reaction, 3 steps occur: carbon fixation, reduction, and regeneration. In carbon fixation, carbon dioxide is chemically combined to a 5-carbon molecule called RUBP, which is catalyzed by an enzyme called Rubisco. This 6-carbon compound is very unstable, so it breaks down into 2 stable 3-carbon molecules, which are at a low energy state. To convert these 3-carbon compounds to a higher energy state, ATP phosphorylates them, which are then reduced by NADPH to form 2 G3P molecules. As well, some of these molecules exit the cycle to form glucose, which is used for respiration. Step 3 occurs, which is regeneration. Basically, G3P molecules are used to make more RUBP, so the cycle can happen again. The important thing to remember from photosynthesis is that the photolysis of water releases electrons, which are transported via an electron transport chain. Earlier, I mentioned that the researchers use both the photosynthesis and cellular respiration of the algae to make electricity, and we just learned how they get the electrons from photosynthesis. But what is cellular respiration? Cellular respiration is the process in which organism cells convert substances such as glucose into energy that the organism can use, known as ATP. It is virtually the opposite of photosynthesis, with the net equation being C6H12O6 solid plus 6O2 gas produces 6CO2 gas plus 6H2O liquid plus heat energy. This is also an oxidation-reduction reaction, however, it is flipped from photosynthesis. In this case, glucose is being oxidized as it is losing 4 electrons per carbon. As well, oxygen gas is being reduced as it is gaining 2 electrons per oxygen. Cellular respiration consists of 3 stages: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and electron transport, with the Krebs cycle and electron transport occurring in the mitochondria of a cell. Although bacteria do not have mitochondria, these prokaryotes still perform respiration because they're actually very similar in structure to mitochondria. Therefore, the cell respiration occurs within the cytoplasm or inner surfaces of the cell, so it is virtually the same process. Basically what happens is it starts with glycolysis, which is where glucose molecules, which are 6-carbon molecules, are split into 2 pyruvates, which are 3-carbon molecules. Several more reactions result in the reduction of 2 NAD+ to produce 2 NADH. In glycolysis, 2 pyruvate, 2 NADH, and 2 ATP are formed. Then, pyruvate molecules lose a carbon molecule to form carbon dioxide, which bonds with coenzyme A to form acetyl-CoA. Then, the Krebs cycle occurs, which basically is where acetyl-CoA is processed through the series of reactions which extract electrons and hydrogen ions producing NADH and FADH2. The electrons and hydrogen ions are then carried to the electron transport chain. This is where it gets important. The electron transport system consists of a series of enzymes, and as NADH and FADH2 pass these enzymes, they release energy as well as electrons. Other reactions occur to produce ATP, as well oxygen accepts hydrogen and an electron to create water. The important thing to remember is that both photosynthesis and respiration involve electron transport chains. These are fundamental to the device created by the team of researchers. The electrons are released in one step and then are taken up in another in order to harness the electrical energy produced naturally. Before we look at power cells created by the team of researchers, we should review what we already know about batteries. As we already know, Electrochemical cells convert either chemical energy to electrical energy, known as voltaic cells, or electrical energy into chemical energy, known as electrolytic cells. Voltaic cells, like this one, are spontaneous. We know that there are two electrodes separated in their own half cells. There is a cathode, which is where the reduction half reaction takes place, in this case copper. This is the chamber where the strongest oxidizing agent is. As well, there is an anode, which is where the oxidation half reaction takes place. In this case, it is zinc. This is the chamber where the strongest reducing agent is. We have our electrolytes, which typically contains the corresponding ion to the solid, but that isn't always the case. There is some sort of way for the ions to move around to the different solutions, whether that is through a salt bridge, porous barriers, permeable membranes, etc. They complete the circuit loop. Anions travel to the anode, whereas cations travel to the cathode. We have a voltmeter, which reads the electrical potential in volts. Electrons travel up through the anode, into the wire, and down to the cathode, which is why the anode usually loses mass and the cathode usually gains mass. In this example, the cell could be represented like this. That is cell notation. The photosynthetic power cell is made up of a polymer called PDMS, polydimethylsiloxane, and is about 10 centimeters square. Consists of a gold anode as well as a gold cathode. It has an external load, which includes a voltmeter, as well as a proton exchange membrane, which is made up of a sulfated polymer, which separated the two species. The algae are placed in the anode chamber. In the cathode chamber, there is a potassium ferricyanide solution with the formula of K3FeCN6. The redox potential of ferricyanide is such that it is easily reduced to its related ferrocyanide, with the equation being this. This is why it is a good electron acceptor. Just like a normal battery, the electrons flow from anode to cathode. The question is, how do they produce electrons? Well, like I said before, the algae need light to perform photosynthesis, so the chamber had glass covers for light to shine through. As they undergo photosynthesis, they release electrons onto the anode surface, which travel up the electrode and onto the wire. Once electrons were released into the anolyte chamber, they were transferred through an external circuit to the other side of the chamber. You may ask how this works in darkness. Well, the opposite occurs. Cellular respiration. In that case, the electrons from respiration are the ones to be released. As well, the transfer of electrons during both processes create an ionic gradient, which is balanced by the PEM. Through different experiments and changing the different variables multiple times, they found a stable working power cell. They found that the concentration of potassium ferricyanide directly affects the output voltage. Increasing the concentration of potassium ferricyanide increased the open circuit voltage. However, the open circuit voltage tended to stabilize at concentrations around 25%. As well, they discovered that decreasing the thickness of the proton exchange membrane and increasing the surface to volume ratio of the electrodes boosted the efficiency of ion transfer. Also, they discovered that as the concentration of algae increases, the number of algae cells that are involved in ionic transfer and are of close proximity to the proton exchange membrane also increases, leading to an increased performance. The power cell reaches reached open circuit voltage as high as 993 millivolts, which is equal to 0.993 volts. However, characteristics of the device indicated the optimal operation range for a stable system to be 300 to 500 millivolts with a peak power of 175.37 microwatts. How does this tie into our electrochemistry unit? Well, electrochemistry deals a lot with the theory behind batteries and other voltaic or electrolytic cells. The photosynthetic power cell is similar to the batteries we learned about. However, it provides a new source of energy with the potential to be more efficient than normal batteries. Some of the pros to these power cells include energy harvesting from algae could be performed round the clock, as these can function during any time or weather, whereas solar panels can only work in the sunlight, and wind turbines can only work when it's windy. As well, they're the most prosperous microorganisms on Earth, meaning that they are sustainable. They theoretically should not go extinct in the future. They do not emit any waste like other fuels, meaning they are environmentally friendly. As well, like I said before, they have the potential to take the burden off diminishing fossil fuels. However, the problem is that at the moment, these power cells are too unrealistic. They are so small scale so that the current power achieved isn't near as much needed. They have the potential to be a viable power source, but to get algae energy to the current position of solar energy, however, it would entail waiting over a decade. As well, something to consider is how they are harvesting these algae. If they were to culture them in the lab, the question is, would they have enough algae to make millions of these power cells? On the other hand, if they were to harvest them from nature, would they disrupt the balance of nature? Even though they are very prosperous organisms, if they were to take all of them from one lake, we do not know what would happen. Even though these organisms can prove to be poisonous, as large blooms kill many other species, such as fish, these organisms can be a valuable food source for other species, in the sense that they naturally fertilize the soil, sometimes turning formerly barren soils into a viable place to grow crops. This is because they increase the soil's content of nitrogen and organic matter, as well their capacity for holding water. As well, they have produced a large amount of the oxygen in the atmosphere that we depend on today, which was once generated by these bacteria during the Archean and Proterozoic eras. A large bloom of these bacteria in the water may be detrimental to the ecosystem and biodiversity. However, the removal of all these organisms from the same ecosystem might just be catastrophic as well. As well, one of my concerns is that once these cells have been used up, where would they go? Are they recyclable? Are the materials used biodegradable? Do they go in the dumps and or landfills? Will the materials used harm the environment once disposed of? These questions have not been answered. Anyways though, you may wonder, why is this important? Well, carbon emissions have slowly been eating away at our ozone layer and trapping heat in the atmosphere, causing global warming. Like I said before, to limit climate change, we need to reach carbon neutrality ASAP. To achieve this goal, our dependence on fossil fuels must be reversed. Therefore, we need to find a new power source immediately. That is where the algae cells come in. We're destroying the Earth as well as the ozone layer with all these emissions, as they're causing the Earth to warm up, destroying many ecosystems. These could one day eliminate that risk. As well, they could one day potentially replace all of our batteries and instead power our cars, phones, televisions, dishwashers, calculators, light bulbs, computers, power tools, hair dryers, clocks, watches. The possibilities are endless. With further research, researchers believe that these power cells have the potential to fuel the world one day, which is why we, as a society, should care about this power-changing issue.